Ding dong merrily on high. Welcome back to the TooFatLardies Advent Calendar 2020. We've made it to door 16. So, grab yourself a mince pie, sit down in your favourite armchair and listen to our very own Sid as he tells us all about his favourite historic location to play a wargame in.
My historical location for the battle isn't so much as one place but an area, and the battle isn't so much a battle as a campaign, but it's a campaign which is circumscribed in quite a tight geographical area. So I'm going to pick the year of 1655 and the last campaign of James, Duke of York, later to be James II in France. So what makes this the choice for this particular Advent window? Well, I've mentioned before on the podcast about my love for the book, which is the memoirs of James, Duke of York in France as essentially a soldier of fortune for the French crown between 1655 and then later for the Spanish in 1658 to 1660. I think this is one of my favourite books, possibly of all time. It's not a particularly easy book, it's pretty dense. You need a map alongside, but the area is very limited in which those campaigns are taking place. So between Tournai, Valenciennes, Mons, Maubeuge, La Quesnoy, Cambrai, Lille, that small area of 30 miles, 40 miles apart, is really the epicentre of those campaigns. Why are those campaigns so exciting? Well, on every page of the memoirs, there's a skirmish or an engagement waiting to happen, or a siege, or something of interest, which is a detail which is passed over in just the descriptions of the big battles. There's a real division and distinction between the troops being used, the French and the Spanish troops, between the militias or the guards or aristocratic regiments of gendarmes, Croats, German reinforcements or Lorraine mercenaries. The locations are described in such a dry way, but which conjures up images and impressions of just a lost place, just forgotten through time. And this is the area which is also crisscrossed, of course, with the First World War, but this is an older conflict. And I really have always been fascinated in trying to understand what was happening in this chess game between the two different sides as they marched and counter-marched, attempted to outflank each other and out-scout, bring up supplies, ambush other baggage convoys, cross rivers using pontoon trains, steal advantages on the enemy through night marches, or forage for supplies, or send out Croats and other light cavalry to disrupt the enemy's attempts to gather in supplies. I always thought this would be a really amazing campaign to stage, and it's in such a forgotten kind of part of France. I mean, it doesn't have the beauties of, the sort of Burgundy or the incredible sort of French countryside around the Dordogne, but that northeast part of France really has a lot of character to it, especially when you go off the rolling hills of Champagne. And I think that would be something which is a really great location to stage a game in. So which historical location are we going to choose? And which battle are we going to fight? Well, that's where this is a little bit of a cheat in our Advent window. The campaign of 1655 didn't involve a huge engagement, not like Waterloo or Austerlitz or Gettysburg, but it involved a host of different skirmishes, small sieges, and various engagements between the two armies. And those engagements in which skirmishing took place, sometimes large, significant skirmishing, hasn't really been blessed with a name. There was no massive field engagement in which one side stood for hours and fought against the other and then one of them was routed. But each one of the major engagements and skirmishes along the roads of northeast France could have been turned into a significant battle. So we would be recreating one of those. And as for the historical location in which that took place, well, those names are also lost in the mist of history. We know the fortified places which are besieged, La Quesnoy or Maubeuge or Cambrai. But the engagements which we'd be looking to try and replicate would be by the side of a stream or on a French hillside or in the outskirts of a wood. And as befitting the book, maybe we'd travel in the same way. So the Duke of York described how his brother, the future Charles II, brought him a set of 6 horses from Poland. They were too small for the coach, but served to mount 2 or 3 footmen. Well, I can just see myself, Nick and Rich, on our slightly smaller horses, trotting through the French countryside to a location near a chateau or a farmhouse in which our game can be set up. But who would we have to join us? Well, I think there's really only 2 contenders for that, possibly 3 if we cheat just slightly. So the opposing armies are commanded by 2 of the greats of French military history. On the royal side, there's Henri de la Tour d'Auvergne, the Vicomte de Turenne, and on the opposing side, there's Louis de Bourbon, Prince de Condé, or as the French call him, the Great Condé, Prince of the Blood, who at that time was estranged from the young King Louis XIV and was fighting for the Spanish. So in deciphering the Duke of York's memoirs, we have the 2 generals from each of the sides, the French side and the Spanish side, who can illustrate and inform us of how their campaigns were designed and how they progressed. We can learn about the campaign objectives. We can learn about how those campaigns unfolded, the difficulties of command, what they thought were the main priorities. And they can also tell us about why those campaigns were successful or unsuccessful, why there are no greater battles, and the tension between outflanking, outmanoeuvring, or, on the other hand, seeking a decisive moment of military history and glory. Now, both of those commanders, Turenne and Condé, had a reputation as being prickly and difficult to work with at times. Turenne, I think, in his later life just seems to be so grumpy about things when you read his conduct at the French Council of War, certainly in the 1670s. And Condé, who was always aristocratic and blue-blooded, just seems to have been very impulsive and hot-headed at various times in his military career. So we need somebody to tone things down a little bit. And where better to go, perhaps, than the Duke of York himself? Now, in his later life, the Duke of York wasn't Britain's most successful monarch by any means, but in his younger days, he was well regarded, he was popular, he was a successful soldier. He was certainly very professional in the way that he fulfilled his duties in the battlefield on both the French and the Spanish side. So I think the Duke of York would be a 3rd person to join us in this campaign, and he can help decipher his own book, let alone leaving it to Turenne and Condé. So we have our battle, or in our case, a campaign, the lost and forgotten campaign of 1655 in northern France. We have our illustrious aristocratic guests, the Vicomte de Turenne and the Prince de Condé, accompanied by James, Duke of York. And we almost have our location, perhaps a French chateau, or perhaps under the autumn canopy of a French wood in the open air, as befits our itinerant campaigning on horseback. And I think that as Advent windows go, of any game we could have in any historic location with my good friends Rich and Nick, that comes right at the top of my list.
Remember, lard is for life and not just for Christmas.